If the season ended today, the Guardians would be in. What will we be saying a week from today? You know, Zach, I realize I am the type of person I just think I'm never quite happy. And the reason why I say that is because this stretch that the Guardians have been on has been absolutely incredible. And if you would have looked at this past week, in fact, we did about a week ago, and then we on Patreon, we continued that a little bit further on. And we both agreed what the Guardians needed to do and what needed to happen was pretty much exactly played out exactly as you would have wanted. But as I'm watching it play out on Saturday, and I see all of the chips falling in the Guardians' favor, I start getting greedy. I start thinking, not only do I want a playoff spot, not only do I want this show to continue as we look at playoff games, not only do I want this division, I want the bye. I don't want to have to worry about that first round. And the reason why I say I'm never happy is because I should be ecstatic. Look at the stretch that the Guardians are currently on. Who could ask for more? Apparently I could, wanting a victory on Sunday and keeping those hopes of a bye alive.
You can't even appreciate the silver lining of, the Guardians didn't win, but neither did the Tigers or the Astros or the Red Sox.
Yeah, I mean, deep down, sure. I had those feelings, but I just kind of want a little bit more. I just got a little hungrier. I want this stretch to continue and keep surprising me in ways that I never would have thought possible.
I don't even know where to begin with this. I mean, it feels like if we record every few days, and in the last few weeks, so much has happened in those few days. And sometimes we text each other like wanting to just pop on real quick because they won and the Tigers lost and the playoff odds just dramatically changed. But if you wait a day or Saturday, if you waited a couple hours, there was another game and that changed things even more. And it's been a runaway train. I mean, it's crazy. I'm sitting here looking at this list. Jason Stark, my colleague, Hall of Famer, I called him the CEO of Baseball Fun Facts. He sent me all these different stats, and I'm reading through, and like, what they're doing is, I mean, it's setting records. It would if they finish the job, but they're not even close. Like, you can't even compare what they're doing to what other teams did. Like, cool, this team overcame a 10-game deficit and got a wild card. Yeah, that's nice. The Guardians might overcome a 15.5-game deficit to win a division. And that's if you want to go back to July. If you go back 4 weeks ago, they were down 12.5 games. So it's insane. And it's almost made it so that, like, it's harder to wrap your head around because of how quickly it's happened. Is that fair to say? I think people have compared it to 2017 and the win streak. And I see some parallels there. Like, that win streak was the only time I've ever seen pitching as good as this. The difference is we were all waiting for that in 2017. That roster was loaded. That, to me, is it's probably a top 2 roster I've ever seen with Cleveland baseball in my lifetime. Is that fair? 95 and 17?
It's up there with 95, sure.
And that team was just kind of treading water, and we've talked about it a million times. You went to the West Coast after the All-Star break.
Don't bring it up. Bad memories.
They got stomped by the A's and Giants. You came back saying, what the hell did I just watch? I thought this team was good. And then they rattled off 22 in a row, and then it wasn't even that. I think they finished like 35-4 to close the regular season. But that team had great players all over the place. This team doesn't. And I think that's what makes this more jarring. And I don't want to compare levels of fun, but like, this has been a blast to watch unfold because it's so implausible. If you would have told me, hey, a Cleveland baseball team's going to win 22 games in a row, I would have said, oh, I wonder if it was the 17 team. Like, that's not the craziest answer to that question. If you would have told me a team's going to erase a 12.5-game division deficit in 4 weeks, I don't think I would guess that it was the 2025 Guardians.
But a lot has to happen to even put you in a position to overcome a deficit like that. If you're truly a great team with a stacked roster, like we felt like they were in 2017, even when they were at their depths of their lowest, that was when they were hovering around 500 and they just couldn't get their stride going. They never had a team that was doing what the Tigers did in the first half to build up that incredible lead and be so many games under 500. So it has to play out in a certain way to get to this point. It almost reminds me of, once again, a movie reference that you don't understand, but in the movie Endgame, Doctor Strange holds up one finger to say that there's only one scenario here that plays out in which we win at the end. And this is feeling like the one scenario for the Guardians, which this all works out. This is the only one, the only reality that exists where the Guardians are able to accomplish this, and it had to play out all exactly in the same way.
There is one team that, so I've seen people compare. I mean, we compared it to 2013 at one point, compared it to 2017. Can we go back 20 years to 2005? That, to me, is the comparison here. That team was 15 games out on the morning of July 26th. They were hovering around 500. They caught fire in August. They had a really, really strong August, but they entered September. Still, they were 7.5 back. And then they fell to 9.5 back the morning of September 8th. And then they made up 8 games in the division in 2 weeks. And they were right there on the White Sox trail. They were right in the thick of the wild card race, too. And we obviously remember.
Don't do it.
We were old enough.
Then what happened?
What happened that final week? So I bring that up to say, hey, don't do what that team did at the very end.
Yeah.
But I think
it's warning.
That's the sort of surge that this reminds me of. But even that team played really well for 2 months. This team played well for that spurt. Remember, they played well enough, and the whole organization was admitting, well, we got a weak part of the schedule going into the trade deadline, so we'll see what happens. And they played well against that weak part. And then you had the Class A stuff the week of the trade deadline, and then you had the trade deadline. And so they played well in July at the end, and then they stumbled again in mid-August. So it's just been so herky-jerky to this point where, I don't know, I feel like, when this stretch where they've won 15 of 17, started with a 5-game winning streak, then they lost a game, and then the 10-game winning streak. But the way their season had gone, to me, it felt like, you win 5 and then you would have lost 5. And they just decided, no, we're actually done losing.
I think part of the fun comes from where we're at in the schedule and realizing at this point of the year, you don't have to know the why, you just have to know the what. And in this case, the what is that you continue to win. If this is June, if this is May, if this is July, and hell, even in August to an extent, I think we would still be having conversations, well, this isn't real. The pitching staff this isn't sustainable. The offense still, yes, they're coming through with clutch base hits, but that's a thing that comes and goes. The whole RISP thing, it can be a fluky animal that you love and hate. So let's take all of this with a grain of salt. But when you get to the end of the schedule and they're trying to complete this comeback, Zach, it no longer matters whether this is sustainable, whether this is something you can believe in for 162 games. It no longer matters. We're down to a week in the schedule. And the question now at hand is, as you look at the Tigers getting ready to come to town, can you take the series? Can you do that? If you do that, you have set yourself up to take this division, and they're already in a position to make the playoffs as of today, so you want to hold on to that spot as tight as you can because the Astros have a weak part of their schedule to close things out. So you're going to want to play good baseball certainly against the Tigers, take that series, and you might be talking about the division, but also looking around the rest of the landscape of Major League Baseball, all without the absence of what does this mean long-term. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, and that's part of what has made this so much fun. It really doesn't have to matter that I don't believe in the offense to be able to do this and score enough runs and have the clutch base hits. It's just, can you do it for the rest of this week? And then get into the playoffs and see what happens. But it's far beyond exceeded what my expectations were 2 months ago about what this team is going to accomplish at the end of the year.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And think of the flip side of it. If you're the Tigers, and you would think what the Guardians went through all summer, where they just said, oh, we got to stay the course. We got to, it's a long season, all those cliches that whether you actually believe in them or not, you tell yourself those, you tell the media those, because then this can happen and you look prophetic. But if you're the Tigers, you can't say that. Well, we'll turn it around. No, you have 6 games left. There's not, it's not a long season anymore. And that's where you start feeling the pressure. Who's going to feel the pressure Tuesday night? Right? Tarek Skubal's going to feel the pressure. That guy's pitched in big games. He's won a lot of awards. So maybe if you want anyone feeling that pressure, if you're Detroit, it's him. But, Spencer Torkelson going to be feeling the pressure. Is Riley Green going to be feeling the pressure?
I've watched a lot of their games here.
The pressure.
I watched so much of this recent series after the Guardians series. That is a team that's playing super tight. That looks like they're playing under the pressure. Now, it doesn't take much to free that pressure.
No, you just need a trip to the zoo.
We've seen
a new
teams
red
overcome
panda
it.
cub named Leela, born to Poppy and Willie. And if you just go take a trip to the zoo. Team bonding. Take your mind off things.
Yeah. But you don't want to go down as that historic footnote, and that's
right.
where that pressure comes from.
So here's what's crazy. I'm going to read you the largest division leads entering September by a team that did not win the division. The record is 7.5. In 95, California Angels, their lead was much bigger in August, too. They blew it against the Miracle Mariners, who I think they had to play a game 163, and then they ended up beating the Yankees, and they gave the Indians a hell of a series, too. So they had a 7.5 game lead over the Mariners going into September. In 78, the Red Sox had a 6.5 game lead. Yankees stormed back. 2006, the Tigers had a 4.5 game lead. The Twins came storming back. These aren't that big of numbers, are they? Not compared to what we're dealing with here. So the Tigers had a 9.5 game lead entering September. So that would crush the record. Do you know who the 9.5 game lead was over? It was over the Royals. The Guardians were in third place. They were 10.5 back entering September. So it's happened so quickly, and you'll hear people say, momentum doesn't exist in baseball. It's only as good as the next day's starting pitcher, etc. But I think that's true, as you said, at a lot of other points in the season. When this is happening at the very end, and you're counting down the days in the schedule, you're looking at what's our schedule remaining, what's the other team's remaining schedule. All right, we've got 5 series left. There's time. When it gets down, this is the last week. This is it. You can't escape it. It's everywhere. It's You see the standings. You have to win that night, and who's playing who, and you can't not scoreboard watch the last week of the year when you're going through this. So it's going to be interesting. And I think the bottom line for the Guardians, and they've done such a good job of having that tunnel vision, if you have a good week, you're in. They've positioned themselves so that you could, let us do all the machinations and scenario generating and all of that. If you have a good week, you're in. If you win the Tiger series, you are going to stand one. As long as you avoid an epic collapse over the weekend against the Rangers, you're going to be in. Right? If you just have a good week, if you go 4-2, you're going to be in.
Yeah.
And you've got multiple paths to get there. So just worry about yourself. Have a good week.
I wonder how much of the end of the season plays into an ability to keep this up. I think of every time you're up against the deadline. Think of in college, you're working towards the end of a semester. You've got big projects due, or even in work, you have some sort of deadline. I got to get this thing done. And you start working at a frantic pace, and you have a certain energy because you can see the finish line. You couldn't, if this was going to be several months, could you keep it up at this pace? Probably not. But because this is it. I just got to get to this point to get to the postseason, and then it's not that you rest, but it's then you can take that brief moment to enjoy and appreciate everything you accomplished, and then hopefully push forward. But I wonder, just again, because you're at the end of the schedule, that is what helps something like this happen. Because you can see the end. You can see what you're trying to accomplish, and it's within reach, and you can get that extra little bit of adrenaline. You can get that, you can jump up out of bed every single day with that extra bit of energy and can't wait to get to the ballpark. An infectious thing that we've seen actually play out for teams like the 2017 group, or even go back to 2016. And why were they able to every single day piece this crap together?
Yeah.
There was just that extra little bit of excitement and energy and enthusiasm when they came to the ballpark. And it wasn't a case of, well, how are we going to put this together today? It was, I can't wait to get to the ballpark and see how we're going to do this today. Yeah. I can't wait to get there. And that's the sense that I feel from this team, even being far away from this group, is that there's just that extra little bit of energy that a lot of these other teams are just playing out the string, and they're just feeding on whatever this is. They're just feeding on it.
I do think you need winning to spur it. You can't manufacture that. Like in 16, I think because the team was already bound to win the division, that helped. Like, they knew they were a good team. You know, you lose Carrasco, you lose Salazar, you don't have Brantley, but they'd already won without Brantley, right? And so that helped. And remember, there was that game in 2016, the game that Carrasco got hurt in, where they stitched together 9 innings, because Carrasco was the first or second batter of the game where he got hit by the comebacker. They stitched together, it might have even gone extra innings, like 9 or 10 innings with the bullpen. So they knew they had evidence that they could win that way, which helped them later on in Toronto. I think with this team, I mean, I think what you're talking about, there is an infectious aura or vibe with starting pitching, especially when you're all the same age. I wrote last week about, we talked about it, the FU fastballs. And that's Joey Cantillo and Tanner Bybee kind of putting their heads together to snap out of pitching without conviction, right? Those are, again, Bybee's in his 3rd year. Like, these are young guys helping each other. You've got, people are watching Gavin Williams lead and watching how he's gone from spending the first 6 weeks of the season nibbling and laboring through innings and, not being efficient, not throwing enough strikes and attacking the zone. And what's been the key for Cantillo? What's been the key for Parker Messick? What's been the key for Logan Allen? It's doing what Gavin Williams has been doing. And it just rubs off on everybody. Like, is it shocking that this rotation, especially as a 6-man rotation, has a collective ERA in the last 2 weeks of 1.25? Yeah, because that number's insane. That's absolutely absurd. But you can see one guy goes 8 innings and doesn't give up a run, and all the other starters are in the dugout taking notes. And they're picking each other's brains. And maybe this doesn't happen if you've got a 34-year-old leading your rotation who's made a ton of money and has won some awards, and everybody else is young, or it's just like spread out. But these guys are all about the same age. And they're, no one has a ton of experience. The most experienced guys came up 2.5 years ago. So I think that helps. They're all kind of in the same boat. They're all in similar stages of their career. And when you realize, if we do our jobs, that's the formula for winning. For how many months did we say, what is this team good at? They had like 1.5 starting pitchers, couple of hitters. Bullpen seemed good until you lost your closer. Then you had some injuries. Now there's no question. We know what the recipe is. We know X plus Y equals W, right? And the X and Y are really good starting pitching and a timely hit or two. Yeah. And that's exactly what they've gotten. And that, to me,
formula as old as time in this game.
Well, yeah, and a formula as old as time for this organization. This is exactly the style they played in 16 until they had to change over from, it's just the rotation doing this heroic stuff, to, well, now it's going to be mostly like some of the rotation and the bullpen. But it's crazy. Like they're 125 is nuts. Like the Dodgers over that span are at 183, which is also nuts. Third place is the Mariners at 251. That's double what the Guardians.
Imagine being
ERA
at
is.
251 and thinking we suck.
Yeah,
We're awful. Look at what why can't we
if
do
we were
what
just
the Guardians?
twice as good.
Why can't we do what they're doing?
The Angels in that span are at 744, so they're allowing more than 6 more runs per 9 innings than Cleveland starters.
I truly wonder how much a 6-man rotation has helped. I'm wondering throughout the game as we see injuries and guys unable to make it through the entire season. And I know there's been some studies on this. I read something a few years ago. I think 538 did some studies on 6-man rotations and the benefits of keeping guys healthy. And there was the slightest of improvements, but we know how teams are in this sport. The slightest of improvement, I'll chase that. The biggest downside is you need 6 guys that you trust. And oftentimes when you have 5, there's always one that you don't trust, so you're going to expand it by 1. That's tough. But in the case of the Guardians, they've had 6 guys that they're comfortable handing the ball, and they're all young starters, and some of them have put together lengthy seasons before, so it's not a question of innings, but any of them, you get towards the end of the year, what's that extra day of rest do for you when you go out there? Do you feel like you have just that extra little bit of juice to get you a little bit deeper into outings? And it's not just been good performances, it's been getting deep into games. And that's been critical because this bullpen, for as much as they've been pretty good, and I know the finale is the one that stands out, they've been good because you haven't had to go to them for 4 innings every single night. Because the starters are getting to the 6th and 7th inning pretty much every single time. And really, if you needed Cantillo to go more on Sunday, you could have done it. It was just a case of, well, the bullpen hasn't pitched much, so let's try to go to those guys, and it ended up biting vote in the butt on that in that case. But most of the time, these guys are just taking the ball and going deep into games, and I'm wondering, do you feel more relief and ability to let them do that this late in the year because you know you're operating with extra rest here in between, and you've been able to not have to not have to push guys too hard when other teams are thinking about inning caps and guys being up against it and making sure they get to the offseason healthy. It's been a winning formula just to be able to pitch 6 guys every single night, and a credit to them that you're not questioning taking any of them out of the rotation or skipping their turn, though that might have been it for Logan Allen for the rest of this year.
Maybe. I mean, so their stuff has held, right? You're getting that extra day of rest. And when they made this decision to go to 6, they thought John Means might be part of this in the second half of September. They also didn't think that this wasn't a move made to say, okay, the way to win the division is if we go to a 6-man. No, they were so far back at the time. They wanted to see more of Parker Messick, more of Joey Cantillo, and they weren't sure what this was going to look like by the final week. I don't know that they thought that they would be in playoff position, and at that point, you could shut down Gavin Williams a little early or Slade Ciccone a little early or Logan Allen, and you could give a start to John Means, give more of a look to Messick. It gave them flexibility. And just in case they were going to make some noise, the way the schedule was structured, you had off days the final 2 Mondays of the schedule. You knew you had that doubleheader. This would give you a chance to not be forced into some weird, because you don't get the extra player for a doubleheader in September. So it's not like you could just call up John Means to make an extra start or someone from AAA. So that has helped. And you knew you could bump up Williams and Bybee for last week's Detroit series, and they'd still be on extra rest because of the off day and because of the extra guy in the rotation. So it's all played out perfectly, as you said. I don't think they envisioned a 125 ERA from this group in the span of 3 weeks, but it's unbelievable. And you see that moment. You don't want to be the guy who screws it up. You don't want to be the guy who has the clunker and sets the team back. So you're laser focused. You're as motivated as can be. You're not slacking. You've got 5 days in between starts now. You're not slacking in those 5 days because you've got to keep up with everybody else. So That's the key, and I think the thing that has paid off in the end is now you look at it and you've got Williams and Bybee again against Detroit, and you've got Williams again on Sunday if you need him, and if you don't need him, you've got him for your first playoff game. So they've set this up perfectly. I don't think they envisioned it working this well, but you'll take it.
I've been so impressed that, as you said, the stuff has held up. To be this deep in the year, and it's not a question of guys looking like they're tired and losing the zone. Earlier in the year, there were a lot of guys battling command. One of the biggest keys, and this might be mentality, it might be part of that FU fastball. And to address, one of the comments said, well, great, here comes all the Tommy John surgeries for all the pitchers because they're throwing FU fastballs. Well, I mean, Tommy John surgery might be on the doorstep for every pitcher because they throw overhand and that's against human nature. But it's not a question of, I'm going to throw it as hard as I can. The FU is the mentality of, I'm going to throw what I comfortably can throw, and I don't care where it's at in the zone. I'm just going to attack with my strikes because I know not only does that make this pitch better, but it makes all my secondaries better because then they have to respect the fastball. But the location has been so good. I was looking at Slade Ciccone. It was his second best stuff outing in terms of stuff plus. But it was also a case where it was probably his best combination of stuff and location. He's had some better location outings, but the combination of stuff being very, very good. To me, just watching with my eyes, that was as good as we've seen Slade Ciccone. He was hitting back and hitting excellent velocity. He was hitting 97 on occasion. The breaking ball looked very good.
When he just rears back and throws it 97 top of the zone, it says, I mean, that's what Tanner Bybee said when I was like, hey, for us idiots, can you just clarify the difference between a fastball and an FU fastball? Mostly so that other media outlets couldn't use the audio. But if he said, like, it's the mentality and it's the conviction behind it, right? And it's saying, I dare you to hit this, basically. And doesn't it look like I was thinking back when I was watching Slade the other day. Remember his first start of the year in Cincinnati? And there was so much of that. It was like, hey, here's this fastball, top of the zone. I'm going to try to blow it by you. If you hit it, kudos. And they didn't hit it. He looked great that day. And I thought, like, that's the other thing. All these guys look better than they did at a previous point. You've seen progress. You've seen development with everybody. That's really encouraging.
Slade looked like, because we've had this conversation about him so much this year, that he's gotten results, and I don't want to attack him for getting results, even though below the surface there looks like there might be a cliff coming for him, and a cliff did come eventually. What we saw in that outing was a guy that I think is a major league capable, good starting pitcher. Like that outing to me didn't look like the smoke and mirrors and the hard contact and letting my defense go to work. That looked like that formula works for him to be a capable, good starting pitcher. More of that, yeah, signing up for that. And then here's Logan Allen as well. How about the outing from Logan Allen? You're thinking, okay, well, he's been the weak link. And it's not that he's been bad, but he's not a guy that I really want starting a playoff game. And I know Minnesota's not this big hulking offense like they've been in the past, but this is still a scary matchup. Dude, I could not have asked for anything more from him. And once again, similar story where the stuff was okay. How about the stuff plus on his fastball was incredible. This was the best we've seen his stuff on his actual fastball. But his location was tied with his best location plus of the season. These guys are hitting their spots. So it's been ridiculous. It's just a repeatable thing that it's not only just good stuff and they're holding it, but it's also their ability to hit where they want to in the zone. And it's showing in pitching. This is not a new formula here. When you hit your spots, it's tough, especially at this level with guys capable of doing what they're doing. You have the worst pitcher coming out of bullpens and hitting 98. This is a ridiculous time to try to hit in Major League Baseball. But when you hit your spots, even if you don't throw 98, you can still survive.
Watch a game. Pay attention to how often a starting pitcher shakes off the catcher. Whether it's Bo Naylor or it's Austin Hedges. They're in a rhythm. I think those guys behind the plate are doing a really good job. I don't know. Do you want to just sit here and talk about Carl Willis for a half hour again? We could.
There's time for that. There's more to get to, but there's time for that.
But they've just, I think we wondered for a couple of years, like the pitching factory, the pipeline. You can't, those things don't last forever. And, it's sometimes injuries can derail you. Sometimes, a draft class doesn't go the way you want, or a trade doesn't work out, or you trade for a guy and he gets busted for gambling. I actually had a dream about that there was a resolution to the gambling investigation last night. Just remembered that. And it was...
And?
Emmanuel Clase walked through the doors of the clubhouse and pitched the 9th inning tomorrow. But Ortiz did not. Weird situation. That is not what's happening here.
According to Zach Meisel's dream,
you'll see that on the Guardians Nation blog or something. I shouldn't even say it. Where was it? What was I saying? The pitching staff's good. Yeah, I don't. But yeah, I think this is evidence that I think that the pitching group in the major league, at the major league level, is really good. And Carl Willis gets the attention. I think a lot of people would argue even not enough attention. We should give a shout out to Joe Torres, who's been by his side for the last few years, to Brad Goldberg, product of Beechwood High School, Ohio State, who did an incredible job in his 1 year as bullpen coach last year, and now has been the assistant pitching coach this season. They just have a good thing going, and it's a reminder that hey, maybe we shouldn't write off this organization and what they can do with pitching. They identify guys who have traits that they think they can work with and get the most out of. Are we not seeing that? I mean, you're Joey Cantillo, you wouldn't look at him and say oh my God, this guy's got just the most devastating stuff. But they're getting the most out of a 92, 93 mile an hour fastball paired with an awesome changeup and then mixing in the occasional curveball. Are they not? Parker Messick doesn't have stuff that's going to blow you away, but through 6 starts, he's pitched exactly how you exactly how you want him to. And Logan Allen, that the other night, you're right. That was I don't want this to sound like a slight on Logan Allen, but that is the best start you can get out of someone with his stuff. Is it not? I mean, he was in such
a lot of
command.
Stuff. Yeah.
It probably helped that he got some double plays early, but then he was just rolling. And it didn't matter that it was third time, a hitter facing Logan Allen for the third time. You'd think, well, they should be able to take advantage. Didn't matter. Did not matter. So you're seeing that sort of progress, and I'm just thinking, I don't know how this week's going to go. And they're in a really good spot. You hope they can keep it up. If it were to end at the end of this week, how desperate is everybody on that pitching staff, the pitching coaches, going to be to get to spring training to get back at this thing? And even if they make the playoffs, or they get a taste of the playoffs, or they make a run, whatever happens, they are going to be itching to build off of this. That is, to me, the biggest development here. We've asked all season for give us something we can cling on to, some strength, some young players developing and showing promise that you can build around in the going forward, and you've got it. And so, whatever happens, you're going to have these pitchers, obviously, get your rest. You need to. No one wants you. No one actually wants the next season to start that quickly, because we don't want your arms to fall off. But
John Means might, but everyone else probably not.
But just think about what that's going to look like.
I just got here. What do you mean it's over?
Remember in 2016 when they lost Game 7? And what did they tell us? Everybody was like, can spring training start tomorrow? They didn't want to leave.
It was weird. I came out of that clubhouse fired up. I could just feel that. And I don't know if they were just... Cody Allen is the one that always comes to mind, because he just kind of delivered a sermon at his locker. And, he had that intensity when you would talk to him sometimes. He just the way he would look at you. And I remember it felt like he was staring into my soul, telling my soul how much he wanted to get back out there and play. And oftentimes you hear stuff like that and you're like, okay, yeah, I believed every single word that guy said. You mentioned you don't know where we're going to be in a week. I can tell you where we've been, courtesy of looking at a graph. And for our YouTube audience, I'll pull that up. Do you like roller coasters? Because this is what this reminds me of. Here's the latest AL Central playoff odds between Detroit and Cleveland. And you could just look at this graph. Currently 63.2% chance to win the Central for Detroit, 36.8% for Cleveland.
Can I ask you a question you might not know the answer to?
Sure.
Does that take into account that Cleveland just needs to win one game to clinch the tiebreaker?
Yeah, I have to imagine they built that into the model.
Okay.
But also, it's just going to look at the fact that it has Tarek Skubal on the mound today, so that's going to give them some. It's factoring in what they think the projected win total will be at the end of the year. That's that is.
So can we run through this really quick? Like if the Guardians sweep the Tigers, they'd sit 2 games up and they'd have the tiebreaker. So their magic number would be 1. You would need 1 win against Texas or 1 Detroit loss next weekend, and you'd win the division. So if the Guardians sweep the Tigers, congrats. You're probably the 3 seed, maybe the 2, probably the 3. If the Guardians win 2 of 3, they would come out of that series tied atop the division, but they'd also have the tiebreaker. So they'd be sitting pretty. Your magic number would be 3. So you could sweep the Rangers and clinch the division. You could take 2 of 3 against the Rangers and have the Tigers lose a game against the Red Sox. You could take 1 of 3 against the Rangers and have the Tigers lose 2 to the Red Sox. Take 2 of 3 against Detroit. You're in a really good spot. Okay? If they win 1 of 3 against Detroit, they'd trail by 2 games, but they'd have the tiebreaker. So your magic number would be 5, so not impossible, but you'd probably need to sweep Texas, and you'd need Boston to take 2 of 3 from Detroit. If the Tigers sweep the series, Tigers clinch the division. So you can see, like, the tiebreaker looms large here. And if either team sweeps, it's pretty much, that's that. If the Guardians can win 2 of 3, I guess if whoever wins the series is what I should say. If whoever wins the series is sitting pretty. And then if anyone sweeps, it's basically over or it's over.
I just love looking through the points of the season where we all were pretty much in agreement that the chances of winning the American League Central Division were over. Obviously, the stretch between July and August, there was a little step up towards the end of July when we were talking about strength of schedule and maybe they make their run here towards the end of July. And then there was that little blip up towards the start of August. So August 9th, it was up to 7.1%, and it dropped down. Then it was at 6% on August 12th. Drops all the way down. Okay, here, August 17th, 1.4%. And then you follow this down. August 20th, 0.3%. Oh, look at this. It's 0.0.
That's it. Curtains.
August 23rd, it's at 0.0, so it's decimal, even below that. Follow this along. This is where this is incredible to me. So as recent as September 16th.
Less than a week ago.
it's at 2.2%. Then it just shoots up September 17th, 4.6%. I can't even follow it. September 18th, 8.9%. And then it jumps to 17.4% on the 19th, all the way up to 37.7% on the 20th. And then it's settled down here just a little bit to where it's at 36.8%.
The incredible thing to me is we all said before the Detroit series last week, remember when they were, even when they were like 8.5 out, 9.5 out, we all said, well, like they'll have to sweep all 6 games against the Tigers and then get some help. So like, let's talk about this later. And then they sweep Detroit and it's like, oh, it's kind of real now. But at no point when we're calculating this or thinking through it did we think, well, the Tigers will also get swept by the Braves. That's what's insane about this. Is all
we
of a
said
sudden
that the Braves needed to treat the Detroit like they had treated Cleveland.
You got all the help you needed, and now, like, sure, if you sweep, that would be the ideal outcome this coming week. But now if you win 2 or 3, you're in great shape too. And again, I will keep shouting this. I know the Red Sox have the tiebreaker over the Guardians, so that's going to be more difficult. But the Astros have fallen back too. And so we'll see what the Astros do on the road against the A's and Angels. But the Red Sox and Tigers end the season against each other at Fenway Park. So if the Guardians lose the series to the Tigers, but then they still could be sitting pretty because the Red Sox could sweep the Tigers and maybe the Guardians still win the division somehow, or the Tigers sweep the Red Sox and then the Tigers win the division, but then the Guardians waltz in as a wild card. Like there's a lot of different ways this could go, and the fact that the Guardians are already, because they have the tiebreaker over the Astros, they've got that going for them. So I think a few things can happen here. That number one, just win the series against Detroit. That's like the most important thing I think this week. Number two, in terms of what could help them, if the Astros just keep stinking it up, and like, I don't know, going to Sacramento, it's not the easiest place to play. That team can hit, and the Astros pitching is a mess at the moment. Who knows?
They just used their 2 best starters in the Seattle series,
Yeah.
and now they got to go to the rest of the rotation, and they got beat up by Seattle.
The Angels stink. I mean, as I said, the last 2.5 weeks, their starters ERA is 7.5, but that would help them. And then it's that Boston-Detroit series, just going however the Guardians needed to go at that point. But look, we also should not gloss over the fact Guardians will also have to take care of business against the Rangers. The Rangers don't have anything to play for at this point. Fangraphs, I believe, says they're dead. I think they're 5 games out of a wild card, technically, but they're 79 and 77, and unless they run the table and everybody else stinks this week, they're probably done. So that could help. Just if they have nothing to play for, they don't. Hey, send DeGrom to Cancun or wherever. You don't need to bring him to Cleveland.
Yeah, no, yeah. Why even risk it? This is a guy if you have any sort of hope of being good next year, keep in mind who you want to be on your team next year, and you should probably just rest them the rest of the way, as Tito would say. I think you should probably sit those guys down just to make sure. Just part of and looking at the graph, the way that this season has gone, I want to continue a conversation that you and I have had privately. This season is so weird because it's been both ends of the spectrum where I've experienced some of the lowest of lows watching this team, wanting to talk about this team, even to a point where like my love of the sport is shaken a little bit just because it's been so rotten. And this is the same season where this is some of the most fun I've had watching baseball at the end of this season, and scoreboard watching and seeing what the Tigers are doing on a nightly basis, and seeing not only what the Tigers themselves are doing, but seeing what fans are doing in reaction to what the Guardians are doing. I tweeted this. One of the most powerful things in sports is the team that's powered by everyone else screaming, "This team sucks! How are they doing this?" And it's like you get up out of bed just a little bit more energized to prove everybody wrong once again that doesn't believe in your black voodoo magic that you've somehow thrown together. And the more people start saying that kind of thing, the more you kind of look around at your teammates and think, I absolutely want Petey Halpin to deliver the big base hit that drive everyone crazy, and George Valera to hit his first major league home run, and like everyone that we didn't even envision ever stepping foot on the field and contributing to a playoff squad, stepping in here to do that. That's part of what's made this so much fun. It's the depths of the lowest of lows that is making some of these highest of highs taste even sweeter.
I think that's why. I mean, this applies to every team that is in that honeymoon phase, and they've somehow carved out a mini honeymoon phase here, just in the month of September, where I think what made '95 so sweet was you had 4 decades of irrelevance and losing before that, right? And what made 2016 so sweet was they hadn't done that in 9 years, basically. So with this team, it's a more narrow snapshot. You're just looking at this year. I mean, this team was in the ALCS last year, but this team doesn't look like the team that was in the ALCS last year. There's a lot of different faces. And we suffered through, whether you're a fan, whether you're people who talk about it or write about it, or you're on the team. Like, that was some miserable, not just miserable baseball, but a miserable environment. You know, it was the fact that the Luis Ortiz thing happened in the middle of the 10-game losing streak. Like, it was everything at once. And the brand of baseball they were playing was just gross, right? Like, the offense was terrible for a while. And then on the one day that they hit, they wouldn't pitch. And the bullpen was really shaky. And look, we forget, like, Clase was, I know he got hot there and he had a good stretch, but remember the first month or 6 weeks of the season, it was brutal. So it was just such a gross brand of baseball. And when that happens, like, last year was the honeymoon phase for this group. And they get to the ALCS and it's all good vibes. And then they entered the season with a lineup that you just said, this isn't going to be good enough. We all knew it. And we were proved true. Like, it's still not good enough, right? Like, the Mariners are scorching hot right now too, but the difference is everybody can look at that roster, the rotation, the back end of the bullpen, the lineup that has gotten significant upgrades throughout the season and say, well, yeah, that makes sense. But we watched this team, and for 5 months, like, the hottest they got was just like 4 or 5 wins in a row, and then they usually followed that up with a mini losing streak too. And so this just come out of nowhere. Like, anyone who's like, oh, I stuck with it, and when they were 40 and 48, I still said they're going to be a... Well, that's just blind hope. Because there was no evidence that pointed to this.
I mean, you kind of even said that, though. Maybe not when it was that low, but you were still saying you thought this team was going to make the playoffs. I think in that 10-game losing streak, you said there was still a possibility.
Yeah, but I would not have voiced that when they lost 9 of 10 in mid-August. That's when I was plotting out taking the rest of my paternity leave for the month of October, which might not happen now. But I think
you're going to have paternity leave left when the kids are 14, 15 years old. Still just lingering in the bank.
But I think you're right. It's how just it was miserable for everybody. I mean, the off-field stuff, the tension the week of the trade deadline when the Clase stuff happened. The team was just scrapping and clawing to try to show their good. Remember the game they lost to the Rockies? That was the night of the Class A stuff. You had the trade deadline a few days away, and they just collapsed against Colorado. And that was the one time where it's like, this stuff's actually getting to them. Like, everybody always puts on a tough face and is like, well, yeah, you just got to block out the noise and just, one day at a time. And that was the one day that I'm like, they're feeling it. And doesn't that feel like forever ago? I mean, it's not that long. It hasn't even been 2 months.
Centuries ago, it felt like.
Yeah. And so it's just, you think about how low those lows were, and it makes you savor this even more.
Right. That's why I'm saying don't get in an argument with yourself. Don't feel bad if you felt awful, because it's those moments. It was as bad as you felt in the moment, and that is what is making this story incredible. That is what is making this historic. That is what is making this, if they complete this comeback, something you talk about. Remember that season where they had that incredible comeback and they came back? They were dead, they were done, they were buried, and they found a way to zombie themselves out of the grave and come back and take down the collapsing Detroit Tigers. And that is all reasonable and taking place because things were as bad as they were. Because this team was as dead as they appeared. Don't rob them of the incredible ride. Don't look at that graph and say, well, when it was actually 0.0001%, it wasn't as bad as it seemed in that moment. No, it absolutely was as bad as it seemed in that moment. And that is what is making this part so much better.
It's the journey. You can fan however you want to fan. You can follow along a season however you want. If you're just, it's ring culture and you say, wake me up in late October, and if you've won the World Series, cool. And if you haven't, I don't care about you. If that's your prerogative, fine. But the journey, especially in baseball, because it's every single day for 6 months plus spring training if you care. Like, it's an investment. It's a commitment. And think about the payoff. Like, if I don't know that they're going to win the World Series this year, but the fact that I can't definitively say they won't is insane. It's astonishing. And think about what
1.1%.
Think about what the payoff could be in a week if you've stuck with it, if you appreciated the journey from start to finish. You know, last season, it's funny. I was talking to Stephen Vogt one day, and he was saying, this was a few weeks ago, and he was saying he got stopped by somebody at one point earlier this season who was like, man, don't you wish things were going as easily as they did last year? And he's like, well, last year wasn't easy. It was his first year, brand new coaching staff. They had a lot to figure out as they went. It might have looked that way on the outside because they started 40-20, and aside from a hiccup in August, they pretty much cruised the whole way. But think about how much easier that looked on the outside. Like, if you're the fan following along for the journey, you were rooting for a first-place team from start to virtually finish, right? And so there weren't a lot of points in the season where you were questioning, is this going to have the happy ending? Is this going to be like a really cool story to tell when I look back at the whole season? And, you know, despite the ultimate ending, that was a successful story, was it not? This year, at what point did you think, hey, this might be a successful story to tell? This might be a journey that I appreciate. You probably weren't thinking that until a week ago. And, like, again, in some ways, I think that makes it crazier. You know how many people have messaged me in the last few days to say, your book on this season is going to be unbelievable? It's like, if you would have told me at any point pre-September 15th that I was going to write a book about this season, and it was going to be like how an organization burned to the ground or something, like, it's wild. So, yeah, I ultimately, like, it's been 77 years. The team needs to win a championship. Like, come on. The fan base deserves that. But
there are levels to this. There's levels of enjoyment. There's levels to this.
And isn't this, I mean, at no point was anyone thinking that this could have a more palatable ending than what we watched for the first 5 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you just look at if you knew no other context other than what the record is, how many games back, you just parachute in today, and I just handed you the standings.
You'd be like, oh, well, solid team.
Yeah.
Boring season.
And you would probably say, well, they didn't really follow up on the promise of last year because they should already be in playoff. But, well, they are in playoff position. But, I mean, legitimate playoff position. They should be leading the division. They should be chasing one of the top 2 spots. And so you would say, ultimately, this season is a failure. And personally, I'm sure if you gave them all in the front office some truth serum,
it's a
they're not very happy to be sitting here today, still playing with their food and figuring out where they're going to be a week from today. But at the same time, you can enjoy this for what it's been. I said this is some of the most fun I've had watching this sport has taken place in the last week.
And now you get Scooble and Gavin Williams.
It ain't over yet. Let's give a quick shout out to Daniel Espino. Just getting back on a mound. Mm-hmm. Incredible personal journey for him to be able to do that. I know the velocity, the readout in terms of, you don't want to scout the box score because it didn't look good. Beyond anything, throwing hard, by all accounts, breaking ball looked good. And just to be able to see that guy emotional as he leaves the mound and realize, I've made it back here. This is not the finish line, but this is just my first step into the offseason. This is the reward to myself to be here, and now let's tackle this offseason and see what becomes of 2026. Just a great moment for him. I felt so good for him.
Yeah, I've already caught myself plotting out, like, just how good he's going to look in spring training. And remember with Clase, we used to be like, oh, what's he throwing here on February 18th? Is it 98? Is it 99? And Tito loved to say it. He was throwing like 100-mile-an-hour bowling balls on the first day of spring. And I feel like we're going to do that with Espino, and we're going to start dreaming up, all right, well, maybe he'll start the year in Columbus, and they'll like really be cautious with his innings so that he can get the call up midseason and then be pitching in the 8th and 9th inning by August and not reach an innings cap. I've got to catch myself because you can get ahead of yourself there.
Who needs the old closer when you got the new closer? Or maybe more. Who knows? It's exciting, but I was just so relieved for him because this has been a journey from hell. Anybody that has to go through the injuries and procedures and questioning whether you're ever going to get on a big league mound, and then to be able to clear that first hurdle and get on the mound, get over that first, and then be able to take that into the offseason, extremely enthusiastic, beyond just my excitement level for what he's going to do pitching-wise, just for him personally.
I mean, it's easy to forget he's 24, and we don't need to write his career obituary quite yet. He's been through a lot, and you hope he can take this and build off of it in the Arizona Fall League and then come to spring training healthy. But, there's still a lot to be tantalized about.
As we record this today, fourth in Fangraphs wins above replacement. Jose Ramirez, likely ticketed for maybe a finalist finish. I'll be interested to see what voters do with Bobby Witt and Jose, because Bobby Witt has an edge in Fangraphs war. Some of that comes from the defense, playing shortstop as opposed to third base. So you get a little bit of an additional bump there. Offensively, depending on which metric you're looking at, Jose's been either a little bit better or they've been on par. Jose certainly has more power, more home runs, slightly more stolen bases. It'll just be interesting to see what happens there. Regardless, Jose's going to be pretty. I can't see him finishing any lower than fourth in the MVP voting. And okay, it's going to be another year where Jose doesn't win the MVP. But if you take into account the votes that this guy has gotten, this might be the year that is finally, anybody that was on the fence of whether or not he was a Hall of Famer, he's probably pushed them to the positive side of that fence just by the season that he's had. But I was curious, just getting the votes that he does, but not winning the award. Who else has had the longevity and been able to finish as high on as many ballots as he had? So I looked at it. There's a stat for this. It's MVP shares, which takes into account every single vote that you get as an MVP player. What you could be down at the bottom of the ballot, you're still going to get credit for finishing on somebody's ballot. So as the season started, he's going to rise based on whatever happens at the end of this season. He began the year at 42nd all-time in MVP shares. He's slightly behind Aaron Judge, who might end up winning another MVP. Do you know how many guys are above him on the list that didn't win an
41.
MVP?
Oh.
That didn't win an MVP.
Any.
Yeah.
Probably only a handful.
Yeah. You're right about that. It is. Do you have an exact number? I'll give you the exact number.
I was trying to think of who else might qualify. That's a tough.
Yeah. Right now, he's the names that he sits between Aaron Judge slightly over him and Joey Votto tied with Jose at 42nd. He passed
Votto won one.
Past Manny Ramirez, who does not have an MVP. So the guys that are in front of him at 39. Let's see, where is Tommy on here? I can't even find him quickly. Yeah, I'll find him in a second. But Piazza, he's 39th.
Hall of Famer.
But no MVP. Eddie Murray.
Hall of Famer.
No MVP, but he's at 30th. Bill Terry, tied for 26th on this list with Freddie Freeman currently, no MVP. And Al Simmons at 25th, no MVP. Everybody else above that at least has one MVP, Hall of Famer. Incredible. I think this helps put into perspective just giving him the credit for finishing on as high on as many MVP ballots as he has, and he's still climbing. He's still going to climb at the end of this year.
Yeah, there are a couple things I'm with you. I think anyone who's on the fence, as long, again, he can't, his career can't end next week. He's got to still have a couple more solid seasons, I think, There's been no evidence that he won't. But the thing to me is, like, I think it would help him if he could just have that signature playoff moment, right? Like, he needs that, almost like that Lane Thomas moment or that Noel moment. Can you just, not that you would even, not even something that is just like statistically tied to him, but just a moment to spark the conversation again in October, I think would help him just in other markets. But the thing to me is, next season he's going to get to 300 homers and 300 stolen bases, and he'll enter that rare territory. I think it's like 9 guys who have done that. And then, I mean, it won't, like the year after he could get to 350. I mean, I think that would just be him and Bonds. He's probably 2 seasons away ish from 2,000 hits. Yeah, he's got it all. And as you said, like, it's crazy when you look at, because there are guys, and we can talk about this more in depth, certainly, once the offseason gets here. But if you, like, I love the Baseball Reference when you go to the guys just year by year record, and they have awards on the right side, right? And, we've seen guys who are like, they won the MVP this year, and they finished 6th this year, and that was it. They were just like a flash in the pan. Or you see guys who, like, I think of Bobby Abreu, who I'm probably higher on I think I voted for him for the Hall of Fame. Like, he was a guy who I always thought, like, okay, like, solid player, whatever. And then I remember studying his stats last year, and I was like, oh my God, was this guy good? But you look at the right side under the awards on Baseball Reference, and it's the highest he ever finished in MVP was 12th. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, yeah, but, like, look at the consistency year after year, and the guy just constantly hitting 20 home runs and having 40 doubles and stealing 30 bases and walking 100 times. And, like, it seemed like every year he would have 300 average, 400 on base, 500 slugging. Like, he was so good, played every day. And he played for 18 years, 2 All-Star games, 1 Silver Slugger, 1 Gold Glove, and never finished better than 12th in MVP. And so I'm comparing that to then Jose's page, where every single year there's an MVP finish in the single digits. Every single year there's an All-Star appearance. He's got 5 Silver Slugger awards. Like, I mean, the credentials are there. And if he just keeps it up for 2 more years, I think he's fine.
It is almost more impressive to me to be doing what he's doing than just have that one single season where he was better than everybody else. Now, we've covered this before. 2020 was that year for me. I think he was better than Abreu. He should have gotten the MVP in 2020, and that would have maybe that changes the narrative even more in his favor, just based on that voting. That not in any additional games played. But you're right. A few more signature moments to help craft the narrative would push anybody that's even remotely a naysayer towards him. But I don't even, to be honest, considering the season he's now having, where he's going to clear 6 wins again, depending on where you're looking at. I know he's close at Baseball Reference, and finishing high in MVP again. I can't see him finishing any lower than 4th. And so a few more years, I don't even want to say at this level, but a few more good years, who's arguing against it at this point? And look at the list that he's climbing with Bobby Bonds and Barry Bonds and Alfonso Soriano and Jose Ramirez, because of not only just the power, but also the stolen bases and what he's meant to one single organization, becoming the plate appearance king. I mean, just an incredible career that we continue to marvel at not slowing down at this point.
Maybe he gets that signature moment this week. Maybe he hits a homer off Scooble. Maybe he hits a walk-off homer to clinch the division. Or maybe he saves it for a few weeks from now in the ALCS, just like we all predicted.
This is going to be a fun off-season exercise, I think. So you mentioned Tommy. He didn't get any MVP, not a single vote for MVP in 1995 when He had almost 1,000 OPS. A 6-win player, essentially, at Baseball Reference. Not a single MVP vote. In 1996, he finished with 38 home runs, 116 RBI, 311, 450, 612 is the slash, 1062 OPS. He finished 15th in MVP. What? Here's the MVP finishes for Tommy.
Because Juan Gonzalez won it that year, and weren't Tommy's numbers better than him?
You might. I have to pull them again. This is gonna be a great offseason thing. Finishes 15th, 6th, 21st, 7th, 4th, 19th, 12th, and 18th.
Yeah, the problem with the 90s is everything was based on narrative. We didn't have Baseball Reference. We didn't have WAR. You just had, hey, this guy hasn't won yet, and he's having a good season, and he's on a surprisingly good team. He must mean more. Yeah, Juan Gonzalez had 3.8 WAR that season, according to Baseball Reference. A-Rod finished second. His WAR was 9.4.
I have a feeling we're going to have some fun Patreon shows coming up. Maybe even depending on what happens in this Tiger series, we might pop up on here again. Who knows?